I'll call this meeting to order, and pursuant to Governor Baker's COVID-related orders, we are meeting tonight via remote participation. A copy of the Grafton Public Meeting Remote Participation Guideline is available on the town website for reference, and we will do roll call. Greg.
Here.
Sue.
Here.
Jeremy.
Here.
Amy.
Here.
Matt.
Here.
And Colleen is present. Okay, so now, I don't have an agenda right in front of me. But we're just talking about our score sheets. So how did everybody feel about that? Good?
Hard. Wow.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. I just struggled a little bit with it.
Same.
Yep. I'm trying to find my copy. Well, not my copy, but my link. Oh, here it is. I have a link.
So Peter described the spreadsheet results as a conversation starter,
Right.
right? So one of the things that sort of occurred to me, I guess, as I was doing, so I went through and I just did my scores, and then I looked at what other people had done. It occurred to me that it might be interesting to look at some type of standard deviation to figure out, we're averaging all of it, right? But the conversation probably maybe needs to be, if we're all giving it vastly different scores, then that's probably something we want to talk about more than if everybody says it's a 3. So that's something to.
Yeah, even where there's like a range, if the highest is, if it goes from 2 to 5 versus they're all 3s and 4s or something.
Right.
Where there are discrepancies, that's probably the right place to. So here's the thing, it's not so much about convincing each other as much as sharing our reasoning for the rankings that are there and see if we, the challenge is, how do you distribute 1 through 5? From my perspective, I started with a 3. I actually almost started out and said everything's a 3. But then I realized really everything should be a 1 unless it needs to be more than that. So that ended up how I scored. And a little statistical analysis would probably be interesting, but I would guess I have fewer 5s as a result. I probably have a lot more 3s and 4s. And that's not right or wrong, but depending on how we use the numbers, we could be trying to say the same thing, but we're using different numbers to say it.
Right.
Well, I'd just like to say that my numbers are not chiseled in cement. I just had difficulty making decisions, and if someone can make some good points, my numbers I can change them. I'm amenable to that. I just was frustrated because when I would I would see things, but like an example, when I got to Bob Burgers for the building inspector, he didn't fill the form out right. I didn't think. He didn't put it out in the range. And I'm sitting there going, I do support this. This is for next year. I don't know what the COVID situation is going to be, but I know in planning board, I'll give that example, when they put in a new window and counter for the planning board, that planning board department had to move upstairs. So that room had to be vacated. And so I'm sitting here looking at all these counters and thinking, he can't possibly do all 6 of those, in 1 year. I wished he had spaced them out over the years. So it was difficult for me to score them. Plus the fact that come July 1st, I don't know if we're still going to be in that building or it's going to be the same arrangement as it is now. So I struggled with some of that stuff.
Okay, so how do you guys want to tackle this? Do you want to go piece by piece and justify our scores? Or do you want to talk about the overall score first? Or how do you envision this going?
Well, I guess my question is there a way to look at if we left it alone, if we didn't make any changes, what would the capital list look like in order?
That's this.
Right there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the, wait, what are we looking at? That's what we have?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is our prioritized list based off our first round of votes. And the fire truck really kind of throws a wrench in there because clearly we all prioritized that, but how
But
do you
so-
prioritize $740,000?
Would we do that all at once?
I'm thinking that's a lease. I asked Peter, we can recommend that be a lease.
We don't have to actually recommend anything at all. That's gonna be the town administrator's decision, and I think every town administrator is different. Like our previous one really liked the idea of leasing and did things like that, where our current one, I was talking to him today, and it's more of a, how can you maybe possibly save for it now that we have the override fund, maybe not this one, but years going forward, where you just pay it all off or bond it instead, or any number of situations, which made me think we might want to give him more than one prioritized list. Like here is the raw fire truck in it, but when you take the fire truck out for whatever version you might choose to do, this is what the list looks like too. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, we could give him the list and then if he decided that he wanted to do a lease, he's got the whole list
Right.
in our spreadsheet and he could say, okay, that's not 740 anymore. We're gonna move that to the lease line and that's gonna be, 130 or whatever it ends up being for the lease. So that unlocks another few projects that we can do. So I think there's a lot more that I want to do with this, but I'm also conscious that we need to turn this around pretty quickly. So I think that's just statistical analysis. Maybe that's something that we can work on this year. Because I think that would be really valuable to actually slice and dice this information in different ways to actually facilitate that type of good conversation. I definitely could be swayed because even as I was going through the list, when I got to the end, the way that I was thinking about it was more evolved than when I started at the beginning. So I don't
Right.
even know that my own process was totally consistent across the whole list. So, but I think that's the valuable conversation so that we can all kind of get on the same page. So I'd be more in favor of just kind of turning something around and just kind of handing the list over as opposed to trying to do multiple lists.
Greg, can you scroll? So I can see more of the bottom. Okay, thank you.
Is it on, I know we're an advisory committee and we're just sending him a recommendation, but is it unthinkable for us to say, we support this and we're recommending a lease for the truck for 4 years or 5 years? Or we would like to see this broken up over 3 years, like the planning board for his counters. I mean, is it unthinkable that we can't say that to him? And
I
mean,
would
it's
have
his
no problem.
decision.
Well, we advise.
That's what I think.
We absolutely can do that.
We can say whatever we want.
Yep.
As long as we agree to it. I think we could say whatever we want, but I guess, so the reason I
Yeah.
wanted to look at the bottom of the list was to see, is there anything like out of place, right? Is
The
there
only
anything?
things off the bottom of the list are the other library projects that
Right.
are already funded.
So I guess, like, that's what I'm looking for is, am I shocked by any of the positions of any of these items?
I guess I wish we could represent sewer differently because sewer is gonna get funded. If they have their other funding source, they're funding it, correct? So I wish I could bump them higher in the list to signify like that's gonna happen for them.
Why are they even in the list then?
Because we were trying to have a comprehensive list.
Ah,
Their funding list is going to be for capital. They use their sewer fees for everything else. They don't use it for capital, I don't
they
think.
checked the box on the form.
I think they have an enterprise fund that they fund their own capital with, is my understanding.
Sewer's always been on the capital list, as far as I know.
But it's funded with not free cash. It's funded with their money.
So why is it on this list?
Because we were making a comprehensive list of all the projects. And so we can include it on here and then have other funding that's where it is. So it's not hitting the number. It's not affecting the number. It's funded with other funding.
But it kind
So-
of skews the,
It does skew the way that we're calculating it. By the way, Greg, this was amazing. It was so fun to just go and put in my numbers and it all just worked. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
It
I
was
made this front
phenomenal.
page do the sorted by itself. So I figured
Yeah.
out how to do that yesterday, so.
It was phenomenal. I think library, right? That's another example where we support those projects, but they're already funded and so they'll end up being reported as capital. I don't know, project that were delivered. But they'd be delivered by a bond and not by your budget, your operational budget. So, yeah, maybe we just need to pull all of that stuff out completely and say, we recommend that these things get funded with other sources. And so what we actually hand over to Carter is, would represent the capital budget. Because to him, like our output to feed into the budget process, it's going to be much more useful if he can have it organized that way, where he says, these are the recommendations that will come out of the capital budget. And these are things that are funded by other sources.
Oh, yeah, it does say enterprise receipts on the sewer
Yeah.
one, so we probably shouldn't have even put that one in there.
Right.
I wonder if in the interest of providing a complete capital list, this isn't it. What we're looking at now
it's just 22.
is our,
Yep.
And it's
Right.
the funding. Yeah.
Yep.
What do we actually throw money towards?
So why don't we move sewer down? Or did you?
I just added the other funding here.
All right,
And
So that-
maybe toss a note on the side explaining the other funding
that's a
so
good
that
idea.
when he sees that.
Makes
And
sense.
maybe do the same thing with the library. The reason that they're low is they're anticipated to be funded through the library project.
Yeah, I had these in here originally, but these will not sort as these things change, so I had taken them out until we were done scoring.
Oh,
So we may have to rearrange these later, and that's something we can fix in the future year, put them on a different sheet, so they do sort.
Yep.
Do we have a starting number estimated?
We do not, and it is still standing by that we don't really necessarily need the starting number. Our job is to prioritize the projects, and then it's gonna be the town administrator's job to figure out what to fund, because there are gonna be other capital projects that we aren't scoring right now that are gonna end up on the capital list because departments have kept it in their operational budget, but it still rings true to a capital project, and it's the town administrator's prerogative to say, you know what, that's going on capital. And while it might not have been prioritized or included in their list, I'm gonna, marry them together and figure out the best.
is he really thinking of taking more capital out of the operating budget?
It's possible, yes.
Because I lectured him last night. I,
But,
I
I'm not
that's
trying to
what
put words in his mouth, but
I
there-
said to him, I said, I said, once you take out things from the operating budget that belong there, it's very difficult to get them all back. And he has complained on a couple of times that there have been some items taken out of the operating budget and funded with free cash. And he didn't think that was such a great idea. So I'm perplexed by that. But anyway, I just told him, I said, there were things taken out of the operating budget that never should have been removed, because once you take them out, it takes a long time to get it back. And since his revenue numbers are so tight, which is fine, I just can't see if he's gonna keep pulling stuff out. But that's my opinion anyway, so.
So how did the Silver Lake building end up above police cruisers?
Well, so because it got
urgent legal.
but so I have a question on mandatory legal requirements. The vast majority of these are ones, but some of these are popping up at fives, and I don't understand why they're fives.
Why is recreation a mandatory legal?
That's how it was marked on the submission form.
Well, the submission form was marked urgent / thing, so there were two different things combined into the
Yeah.
same.
It's a decrepit building, but I don't
Well, it's not.
I don't think we face legal repercussions if it's not.
I think we actually do face legal repercussions if it doesn't get fixed.
What?
having been in the building myself, I can tell you it's absolutely disgusting. The
And I'm
working,
not suggesting it's not, but let's not jump to a conclusion about, we obviously don't have the money to pay for everything we want to pay for. A partially used building, it's hard for me to understand how that is near the top of the priority list.
can I finish?
I'm sorry, I thought you were.
I was not. So what we're facing is a working condition problem where we can't hire people to work Silver Lake because the working conditions are so poor. Nobody wants to work in that building. It's not that it's gross.
Yep.
It's falling apart. It's a hazard.
I,
So I
I'm,
looked at it that way. But
I'm not disagreeing with you on its condition. I can't speak to its condition, but to me, that is an impact on service and personnel category. That is not a legal requirement category.
That's how I looked at it as well. Because when
too.
I think of mandatory, I think of state law as mandatory, that we
Same.
have to be under that. So,
I think when I think sort of compliance, I think ADA. So a lot of like the counters, to me, those are ADA compliance issues. Repaving parking lots. Those are again ADA. Keeping the fire equipment current. It's both public safety as well as compliance issues. You can't send firefighters out there with outdated equipment. So I don't know. I also struggled a little bit with the impacts to the community in the sense that when we think about something like, what's a good example? I don't know. So it's a relatively small community that are actually using the Silver Lake Beach versus people that are using schools, for example. So it's how much of the community is actually benefiting from the upgrade or the project that's being done. So I wasn't quite sure how to factor that in, but it seemed important to me.
So impact, I was reading that as community, but also personnel, like are our employees going to see a better working environment through these projects?
Yep.
So, and the Silver Lake building is interesting because when you look at that, it's split. It is like 3 members thought it should not be a mandatory legal requirement, while 3 members strongly did. So I think that's the other beauty of this weighted factor, is that takes all of that into consideration, right?
Yeah, but the weighting is, because of the weighting, I think we have to be we're basically saying every point here is worth 3 points in 3 of the other columns. So I think we got to be judicious about using the mandatory legal points.
Can you say, oh, because of the weighting, I see. Yep.
Because they're 3 points to, that's the most heavily weighted, as it should be. But the reason it should be is because it should be for the category of stuff that we simply must do. We're
Yep.
under an obligation to do.
So what is it nudging out? If we could go back to the compiled results to see where it falls.
So
Second.
if we had like an OSHA finding, right, in that building,
Mhm.
that would be something that would be more relevant for compliance
I
and
would-
mandatory.
Yeah, for
Like
mine,
the
for me, for the
DPW building was that in that state, right? DPW, that there were actual OSHA issues there.
well,
That
they would have
been
shut the building down. There were so many OSHA issues.
right. So I don't know where we fall as far as that building on Silver Lake, but in future years, it probably makes sense for us to touch base and see if, and sort of more clearly identify maybe with the requesters that that's the sort of thing that we're asking for when we're talking about that, checking that checkbox.
Well, and they may have alternative funding sources that, I'm trying to remember, did she check CPA?
I'm not sure, we did not have her in. So if, I can't remember off of the sheet if that was
And-
marked or not.
But they do
And
now have a
that-
revolving fund. So,
If Carter doesn't put it on the list for this year, she may look at that anyway, but I know
We We could send that one along and just make a note that, there wasn't a like strong consensus or something.
What does the list look like if we turn the fire truck to like $125,000? Let's make it a lease payment, and then how many other things are funded? Because I think this is really screwing our judgment too of what's getting funded.
Well, based on $1 million, it gets all the way down to
The
almost
master
the
plan.
DPW. So just a note for future years, we might want to split up urgent and legally required on the sheets.
I think that's a good idea, Greg.
Is there any reason we can't do that now?
The ones that the department submit to us is what I'm talking about.
I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I had that thought too. I wish when we had everybody in that I had asked the question, what is your must-have list?
So we I know I nudged around that with DPW, like I gave him a what if we just did George Hill and didn't replace any of the trucks? And he was kind of like, we'll make it work. It's, they know that this is a year out before they see a truck. Would it be their favorite plan? No, but they would make it work. So that to me didn't give that sense of urgency that they wouldn't be able to plow streets if we didn't fund it this year and waited a year. So
Well,
that we
there
could
was-
fund another project.
There was one truck that can't get any inspection stickers anymore, so I kind of looked at that.
That was the loader, yeah.
But
Yep.
that's not getting,
It's not going on the street anymore. It's just
Right.
gonna be a salt truck.
right.
No, this one was going to be rebuilt, so it could go out on the street.
Yeah,
They got
They
they
needed,
got the inspection.
I thought 38 was,
they
I thought
need,
38 was the
there's-
dedicated salt truck, so they didn't need to mix others in.
There will-
Jeremy, you're correct. The 38 loader is replacing, they have a dedicated salt loader right now. They're gonna restore this loader, and that's the scooper that puts it in the truck, and that's gonna become the yard loader.
But not right away.
Not right away.
That's not until a few years down the road when the current salt loader dies. This one will become the salt loader, and then they'd get a new one. So they
That's
wanted
what I
to have
heard.
two
I missed that.
street legal ones. This one cannot, this one is street legal until the next time it needs to be inspected. And then it's going to fail unless they rebuild it.
and see, this is why it was so frustrating when I look at, I would go back and read everything they had. And when you see the DPW, they say it takes a year to get a truck. I mean, we can give them a truck for 22, but it isn't going to be ready for another whole year. And just like the fire department, depending upon the truck, they have to build that. So that takes anywhere from a year to 2 years to get that truck built. So there's also that time frame that I look at, and I wonder if we don't give them something this year, we're really putting it off for 2 more years. Or not
Yeah.
one.
Truck 44.
Right, we can't speed it up later.
Truck 44, if we fund it now, they estimate it'll be ready in July of 2022. Truck 42, if we fund it now, it should be ready in spring of 2022.
Is that what he said? He said it took a year. I've got notes that said it took a year.
Yeah, so a year.
Yeah,
from
so it'd be
July.
approved in the spring
Right,
and then the
Ordered
order.
in May, ordered in July, and it'll take a year.
right.
And the other one would take 9 months. So the expense, the $234,000 one is a year, the 61,000 is about 9 months.
Right.
Can you just put a note on the fire truck that we reduced it to a potential lease payment cost? So if we do end up submitting something like this, it's flagging why we have that number. Thank you.
So can we go back to the Silver Lake building for a minute? Because
Yeah.
that's the one thing that to me is too high, and it's probably partially my fault. But now that we've had a discussion about it, and I want to change my scores, that would move it down on the list.
Which scores would you like to change?
Well, it's not legally, where's the one that mandatory legal requirements?
What would you like that to be?
Take it to a 2. I'm thinking part of the problem here is that the scale is so wide.
Hmm.
I'm not saying we should do it this year, but maybe next year we could try doing a 4-point scale, so there is no middle ground. Because I found it difficult, 3, 4, 5, I was goofing around with it. But, I wonder if a 4-point scale might help. So there it goes. Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, well, no, Matt and Colleen also have it as a 5.
Yeah, it wasn't any one person.
It was 3
It's
versus
a-
3 for sure.
It's
Yeah.
how we're using the sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thoughts were, I wasn't thinking of reducing the range, but that's certainly something to look at. But almost forcing us to do ranked. Like, I'd like to do this from a ranked perspective as well, maybe independent of this. So this is an exercise for after this year. It's not useful this year. But in my head, I have a relative ranking of the importance of these things that is not directly borne out by these 5 categories and these scores. But, you know, what I was talking about earlier, where if we could agree on a methodology for what does a 1 mean, what does a 5 mean, you know, and having fewer numbers to define would be helpful. Because if one of us stuck to the middle and said, well, everything's a 3, this bumps up a little, so it's a 4, this bumps down, so it's a 2, and you just use the 5 and 1s for extremes, you're going to have a very different outcome than if you have someone say, I'm totally convinced this is necessary, that's a 5. I'm not at all convinced this is necessary, that's a 1. And the middle ground is sort of squishy and soft.
Right.
Both of those approaches are valid. We didn't really cover off how we were doing it. So I think this is where the statistical analysis becomes interesting again, is I think it'd be interesting to see how our scores spread, which I'm just looking at the grid right now. I mean, you know, it is what it is. We've got to come up with a list. I think we've done a good job. I think the mandatory is just a tricky category that it's like a trump card in poker. And so that's not a political statement. That's a poker, or that's a pinochle statement. But, you know, it really, mandatory should almost be binary, I think.
I was just gonna say, what if the legal requirement one is either 0 or 5, or 0 or 0 and 3, or like,
Yeah, 0 and 1, which means
Yes or
0
no?
and 3, but it's got to be of equal.
right,
It's got to have the proper relative weighting to the others,
right.
but I don't think that's one that really needs a range. I think that's one that really hangs on either it is or it isn't.
Well, so let me
ahead.
argue. Oh, go ahead.
So the one thing that I originally had everything as a 1 because nothing was mandatory. And then the one thing that I changed to a 3 for that was the handicap parking at Millbury Street School. Because while we don't have currently a finding on that, it is something that the current parking is not near an entrance, an active entrance. So
Yep.
while it may not legally be required right this minute, it could easily become required tomorrow.
Have we heard anything? Because that's very germane to my rating of that. I stuck with technically we're legally compliant. I understand from a services and a desirability standpoint, this is a change they want to make, but I did not understand it to be a legal requirement.
Which school was that?
Millbury Street.
Millbury Street, handicap.
Yeah, so the handicap parking is by the gym, cafeteria
Yeah,
entrance,
it's at the end.
and by the playground, neither door of which is open to the public generally. The
And
door is in the middle of the building.
what's been happening is that people would park on the side in the front of the building, and the fire marshal has said that can't happen anymore. And there are signs there that specifically say you can't just park in front of the school. You have to park way far away on that front entrance, and that puts us out of compliance.
Yeah. So I
How
think
are we out of
I think that's
compliance?
step.
You have to have,
Again, I just want to separate between desired and required.
it is required to have a certain number of handicap spaces, a certain distance from the building. I don't have the information in front of me.
It
Okay.
is. So I've been spending, I spent the last 2 weeks looking at our, it's called the ADA self-evaluation plan. And it's unfortunately, they typical, they didn't, do it at the schools. So it's everything except the schools. But the schools have applied for a grant to fund a self-evaluation program to evaluate their own facilities. But when we talk about the range of things, and this is a good example, the ADA self-evaluation plan has a priority to it. So there's priority 1 through 4. The priority 1 stuff is always things like parking, ramps, railings, stuff like that, right? Bathroom facilities. So those kind of things I would say would be a 5 because those are high priority and they've been identified by an independent evaluation plan by an outside party. So we don't have those for the schools, but you know, in light of that, you can get the flavor of what's the most important in terms of ADA compliance. I would say that those things would be more on the higher end of that mandatory legal, you know, aspect. Whereas things like signage, in most cases, light switch heights, there's some door clearance things that are like slightly out of compliance, some things like that that are just lower priority stuff as identified by the, you know, the people that do the evaluations. Those might be less in terms of our estimation of what needs to get done when, so.
So how far is the take for those handicap places that are at the school? How far do they have to walk to get to the entrance they have to enter for the school?
2/3 of the front of the school,
That's quite a ways.
plus some. I mean, if you voted over there, I don't know where you vote, but if you've ever voted over there,
Over the middle school.
so yeah, I don't have measurements, but oh, Greg's gonna bring up a map.
It's a distance though, because they have to go in order to go into the building. There's security that they have to
Yes,
go through a door.
that's
So-
probably part of the reason why we've
Oh,
gotten away with it for so long. And I say we because I was part of that community until this is
Yeah.
first year to have a kid in that school. We've gotten away with it for a long, long time, until we put in the additional security measures.
okay.
Now,
Handicap parking is here.
Yeah.
The entrance is here.
And see, I can tell you, having a grandson who has rheumatoid arthritis and is currently on crutches, that's a long walk for him to get there. And I mean, he used to be able to go to school and the principal would run out and say, he's parked, you can drop him off here, and always made an exception for him. But, you know, it's a long ways for handicap parking for someone who's on crutches or in a wheelchair or whatever.
So this parking is close to this entrance and this parking is close to this entrance, but those entrances are not open during the school day. Only this entrance here.
Right, because of security.
and just the
Right.
justification was that in theory, right, only visitors would need to use those spaces. And visitors would be coming in, especially over on the gym side.
Yeah.
So that
Yep.
was, you know, but even on, you know, there are days when we have parents who are handicapped who need to come in for, say, a conference. They have to come in that front door in the middle.
Right.
So, and
Yep.
that's something we've been putting off for quite a while, just because we've been getting away with it and now we can't get away with it anymore.
Yeah, and here you can see the light poles that are gonna have to be moved. Probably, most likely this one and maybe this one, and possibly the flag poles as well.
Yeah, I was kind of confused about where they're going with that. I was assuming it's gonna go to the left. Because that's the wider tract of land, because that's a pond off the screen at the top.
Yeah, well, they mentioned a retaining wall, so I
Yeah,
think
so
they're
they're
gonna
gonna-
wall that off and level it.
Yep.
Was my assumption.
So I think it's important we make sure that gets up to a higher list, in my opinion.
Well,
So
isn't it?
what if we take the weight
That is
factors
number
out?
one.
Yeah, it's there. It's
Yeah.
covered. I was just questioning, so, and I hope I'm not coming across as heartless here. I'm just trying to be stringent in terms of I chose to be stringent in how I used a legal requirement. I did not understand that we are currently out of compliance. I can totally understand we are not where we want to be. And that it's an enhancement to the community, and it's, you know, there's a lot of reasons to do that. I just didn't understand them to be legal.
What if we
But
change?
I'm not like upset that it's in the funding list. I'm more trying to look at the process, and that's another one that obviously the mandatory requirement looms large as a big part of its weighting. I think it's fine. It's just it shows the impact of that field, that category, that the things that were ranked the highest were number 1 and 2 on that. But is anyone troubled by it being number 1 on the list? I'm not.
No,
I'm more just trying to use it as a way of looking at our methodology and seeing
actually,
if we're being consistent.
actually it's third because of the other ones above.
Yeah.
Well, it's the first on the list of things that we're not already committed to.
Right. So first that we voted on.
So where, Greg, show me again where we end.
This is the sorted list.
No, I mean,
Where's the money run out?
what out?
We don't
Number
know.
9, master
No,
plan.
just a million.
Yeah, this is based on $1 million,
Okay,
which $1 million gets us down to master planning update. Now we know that we're putting 800,000 in the stabilization fund. We had what, 250,000 in there to start with. If we
360.
were to use all of the money from the capital stabilization fund plus the 250,000 that was already put in there to start with, and a little bit of free cash, that would get us down to the DPW truck.
Greg?
Yeah.
Look at somehow the enterprise fund field that's supposed to be next to sewer is in the library.
Yeah, I think things got reordered.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah, because people are changing numbers behind the scenes, so that moves things around.
Well, we have a chat from Colleen. What?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. If we change the weighting factors all to 1, because I think that that's what's kind of also messing people up when they went and scored it. I don't think we all factored the weighting factors the same. So if we just said there were no weighting factors, what does the field look like then? And does that change the way people feel?
You want it for just mandatory legal, or do you want it for public safety as well?
For all of it, because I think it just gives us a different feel. And I remember Peter talking to us about that as well. They tweaked the weight factors to make things look differently. So it's just an exercise, just to see what it looks like. And then we can also tweak the weight factors however else we want it. So even at 1, handicap goes right to the top, but the list does change. Silver Lake went down, the schools kind of went up more.
I like that.
Well, I think that's pretty much where we were just before.
Can you scroll up? I think we're missing a few at the top.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
there you go.
Southcraft and Receiver moved up above the handicap parking.
Oh, okay.
So the DPW truck is still the one just after the cutoff. So something moved out because this was,
Master plan moved out.
oh yeah,
Yep.
master plan
Yep.
moved down. Now
This
that
is-
one's interesting because that is 30,000 that's going to get reimbursed the following year. So we can spend it
And it helps with other
and then we get
stuff.
money back the following year.
So that's another one that I probably ranked pretty high on legal requirements. Because, and again, Jeremy's gonna be mad because
I'm
But-
not mad. I just want to be consistent.
we need an updated master plan to do things. So that to me is a required expenditure. Our master plan is 20 years out of date, just about. And
Years old.
in order to get funding for additional projects, we need an up-to-date master plan. So to me, that was like a legal requirement. Because I played fast and loose with that definition.
Right. So I agree it's very important. I would not agree it's mandatory and legal. I mean,
But-
it is required. It is technically required, but we've ignored it for however long. So it's not that required.
So I ranked that high on infrastructure and impact on service and personnel
Yeah.
and probably efficiency.
Well, Jeremy, it's true, it's 20 some years old, but it isn't that it's never been brought up at budget meetings and discussions, because it was brought up that we wanted to put $100,000 aside, I think 6 or 7 years ago for a master plan. And that was scuttled right away because there were other
Mhm.
important projects that were seemed more valuable. So I'm just trying to be nice here.
No, and
but it is-
actually just,
It's been on the horizon always.
and I think it's a
understand what
great idea. I just think it would be better if it were justified over the other 4 categories.
Should we put that $30,000 in the other funding? Even though it's not gonna, it's a reimbursement in the future fiscal year?
Still have to spend it this fiscal year.
No, but I think it's worth putting a note to the side so it can be factored in when the town administrator makes his decisions.
See, I didn't even score the master plan that high. Don't tell David.
Oh, and I probably
But I-
scored it too low. Like I would increase the service and personnel because I think it helps us do more later, do more down the road. So I mean, I'd be willing to tune my rating there.
Yeah,
Let me see here.
it unlocks some grant opportunities for sure. Talk to me about why you think it's infrastructure though, because when I was thinking infrastructure, I was thinking buildings, roads, and trucks. To me, master plan is more about, so maybe roads in terms of planning, but
Did you guys refer to the definition of each of these at all when you were scoring?
No.
Which,
That would be too easy.
The 5 categories.
Yeah, yep. So
No.
when we had the instructions for all the department heads to submit the forms and it,
RTFM, is that what you're saying?
I don't think I followed them either.
I didn't.
so infrastructure is defined as how does the request address the community's needs within the context of existing infrastructure problems and how well does it integrate with that infrastructure?
So to me, the master plan plays across all of these. I think you have to have a plan in order to know what infrastructure to go after, to know where the deficits are, to know where the needs are. It's going to affect our ability to invest in items for safety and health. It doesn't directly accomplish these things, but it's supportive of all of them.
I mean, it had schools in there. I mean, it covers all of that. I agree, Jeremy. And the last previous master plan did say a new high school at some time in the year. So it does, play into infrastructure.
So you can say it addresses the community's needs with our infrastructure problems. Is
I
that
think
fair?
it's a
to
tool
say?
it's a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, I
It's
would-
part of the solution.
Right.
I'd agree with that.
Okay.
yeah, it's like the strategic plan, right?
Right. And legal
Mhm.
requirements does it bring us into compliance with legal requirements or mandates at the state or federal government? So I don't know if that would help. how, do we want to try rescoring again? Do we feel comfortable where we are, or? do
I
people
would
wanna-
definitely suggest not a wholesale rescoring, but I think this conversation is very helpful. I have a couple of tweaks I would make to my stuff. I mean, nothing earth shattering, but you know, I in hindsight, I feel differently than I did this afternoon when I scored it the first time.
Well, I do too. So.
But I think the
Same.
weight factors, I think we need them for a reason, or I do think we need them. Maybe we could reduce them.
I'd agree with that.
I think
So
we
like
should.
one
score
point
them-
five and 2 or something instead of 2.5 and 3, but because those categories, I mean, health and safety and legal, they kind of have to be up front.
Right.
So I do think we need a mechanism for doing that, but maybe a softer bump.
Or when we score not knowing what the weight factor is going to be. If you know this is a legal requirement, you have to give it that 5, regardless of what the weight factor is going to be. And we add the weight factors in after, just like the money. You're scoring how you're scoring. We find out the money later. Is that possible to remove some of that? Well, I know this is going to be multiplied by 2, so I should only give it a 3 because then that's going to make it a 6, or it's
Yeah,
important.
no, that's where I think give the numbers themselves, you know, numbers 1 through 5 should be the values. Don't worry about where it lands. But that's where, but if we're gonna do that, I think there's gonna be gaps because a 4 means something different to you than it does to me. You may be more inclined to use a 5. I would use a 4, and that's not wrong for each of us. But in comparison, you know, you're ranking stuff higher than I would be, or you're ranking it lower. I'm ranking it lower, whatever. You know, we should. I would encourage everyone here to use the full range of numbers available, because I think it gives us a little bit more granularity. If we're dealing with all 5s and 1s, with the exception of mandatory, as I've stated earlier, you know, I'd almost challenge each of us to, do we have at least one of each ranking? You know, and that's kind of silly, because maybe the things really do all deserve to be 5s and really do deserve to be 4, but just to challenge ourselves and look at what our natural range is. I mean, I am living large on 3s. 3 is definitely my dominant score looking at this. So what I would like to do is go back, and I'm just talking about what I'll do for myself. I'm going to look at how I distributed 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s, and then just question whether those are really reflective of my belief about the project, or was I influenced by, you know, the other scores on the grid? Because I will confess, seeing what other people scored definitely impacted my score, and it shouldn't have.
So should we reduce it to 1 through 3? That takes a lot of subjectivity out. It's just 1
It
through
is. I mean,
3.
yeah, that would simplify it dramatically. I don't know how others feel about that.
I don't particularly mind rescoring, but if that's going to be too much work for everybody, I don't want to put that on the committee either. We did the work. But this is really an exercise in seeing what works and what doesn't. And now we're seeing it all together for the first time. We're talking about how we all may have been scoring it differently and not really knowing the definitions of what we were scoring. So it's just, I personally wouldn't mind rescoring again, using the 1 through 3 and looking at the definitions and seeing where I end up again. I don't think it's gonna change much, is what my guess is, but.
I like the granularity of 5, so that it's if it's 3, it's either it's middle of the road, or it's not important, or it's the most important thing in the world. So that's how I look at 1, 2, 3. So I think going back through, now that we've talked about it some more, and I think I was always expecting that we would probably go back and do another round of personal updates. But I think taking into account the descriptions that I forgot we had for these things, that doing another round of scoring would be useful.
What about,
The 30th, the
Oh,
next
I'm sorry.
meeting that we have. And I assume we couldn't do anything, if we don't have it already scheduled, we couldn't do anything other than Wednesday next week. Is that accurate?
so how about we then, what about a 4-point scale? Because then you have above middle and below middle, but it will still compress the range a little bit, which I think helps bring right now, we are subject to more deviation. That would rein that in a little, but still give some subtlety in the middle ground. Would that work for you?
Does anything stop us from writing 2.5 if it's a 1 through 3? I
No
mean, all-
decimals, please, no decimals.
Okay, all right.
There's nothing in the sheet that will prevent it.
Don't tell them that.
All they have to do is try. and find it.
I guess my-
1.37852.
Everything's pie.
1.4, 1.5, 9.
I understand what you're saying, Jeremy, but I still like 1 through 5. And I know I could go back and probably score things a little differently, but they're not going to be major.
I kind
That's
of do
fine.
too.
I mean, however people want to rank it, it's the greater the spread, the more variable the more impact our different methodologies have. It's not about the values, it's about our method. So I was just trying to compress that a little.
So I think as long as you are consistent within your scoring, the fact that your scoring 4 is little more important than someone else's 4 in the same category, I don't think will have a big impact.
Right. And so
Okay.
I'm not sure if you guys did this, but for myself, it was helpful to, in my tab, I just summarized my scores so that I could see what my rankings were based on my, the way that I thought about it. So that may be helpful as well.
You want me to show that, Matt?
Yeah, if you want to. I added a summary column at the end to just calculate up what my numbers were and it was just a sense check.
Yeah, I mean, I always viewed this meeting tonight as touching base, comparing notes, and then that we would make adjustments in the next week before we meet again on the 30th. And that would be the last opportunity we would have to make adjustments. I had to take a phone call just now, so I'm sorry if I missed something.
No, I agree with you, Amy. I thought this was gonna be come together, see what it looks like, and make any changes we need to. And I also agree with Greg saying earlier is that we might have to rescore again when we come together. So I guess just take a straw poll on that alone, even just for the comfort level of what we're presenting. Does everybody feel comfortable with their first round of scoring, or would they like a second round of scoring?
Second round.
I could do
Yeah,
it.
so, I mean, I think anyone who's comfortable with it doesn't have to change anything. But if people want to make modifications, they should be able to.
Okay,
That's my vote.
I would find it helpful. I don't know what email that those definitions were in, Colleen.
I'll send it out.
I was gonna say that, or maybe throw it in the drive,
So yeah, I'm really good at that.
or Greg can do it.
Well, send it out. Don't put it in the drive because I'll miss it.
Send it out, and then I can add it into as a tab in the
Have both.
spreadsheet later.
Do you guys remember the email that had the blank submission form and then the guide to how to fill it out? Do you guys have that email still?
Yep.
It's probably not.
Well, it's not a problem, but I can definitely send that again.
I have 47 emails in my inbox that have CIPC in them. It would probably take me a while.
I
We're
flagged
fancy.
mine,
Well,
but
Oh,
I
they
You'll
are
have more.
flagged.
so.
They're flagged as CIPC, which is not helpful.
I know. Same here.
So Do we have any questions that that came up during our scoring that we would like clarity on from the departments that we could submit to them and perhaps get back within a day or two? Maybe submit them so they can see them on Monday, and maybe they'll answer us by Wednesday.
So I had a question on the tile floor replacement. How much of a health issue is that, health and safety?
I'd say safety rather than health, as the tiles are coming up, they're a trip and slip hazard. Is my,
I know that. I slid on tiles.
I'm mildly concerned that that's not higher, but I also know that, you know, maybe they don't do that many. Maybe they do a smaller amount with the operating this year, and then, you know, do more next year.
Yeah, I still have, well, I'd like to know from Mr. Berger why he didn't phase these all in over various years. I mean, he can't possibly do all those counters in 1 year. That's just not, he really didn't finish out his form. He just put down 6 of them, but he put nothing for 22, 23, or 24.
Can we use CARES money for that, though, is my thought.
Can we use what?
CARES money? I know some
By
towns
the
use
time,
CARES
I
money.
don't know. Is
I
COVID
don't-
gonna still be there? Probably, but
No, the CARES Act money goes away December 31st of this year. We have nothing to fall back on until there's a new package. So I had that same thought, but the other thing is, let's say we're going to use CARES Act money for that. Are we even going to need it? Like July 1st would be, let's say they pass a package, right? The Senate passes a package in February. He could start that work right away and use some of that money for that. But if people are getting vaccinated and everything, some of that isn't going to be required. So that cost is going to go down. Like the plexiglass that's a COVID thing. Lowering the level of the counter is not. So I bet you that would be a problem with using that kind of money.
well, lowering the counter for the treasure collector was an issue because there were people who, when they came in, if they were in a wheelchair or, the elderly, they couldn't handle that high counter.
Right, but
Right.
that work wouldn't be covered by COVID funding.
No, that's true. You're
So
right.
only the plexiglass really would be.
Sure. There's nothing that is to say that we, I totally get where you're going with that, Sue, and I agree with your thinking on it. But there's nothing to prevent us from saying that these service counters represent many different individual projects, and we're only going to fund it at 100 grand instead of 300 grand. And you get as many as you can get done with that money. But you're going to have to spread that out over a number of years because we can't make that kind of investment all at once, understanding the logistics and funding. And I think that's,
I get that. And
Well,
can we,
we requested the library break stuff out. It seems reasonable that this other stuff could be broken out. I mean,
right,
obviously, it's
because
too late now, but
Yeah.
going forward, I think that's
Not
very
too
fair.
late. It's not too late. Because if you look at the form, study and design is 25 over 5 years. Or 5-year total, and construction is 300. He didn't actually put it in any fiscal year at all.
no, he didn't. That's what I'm
So
saying.
we could fund the study at 25.
The design.
Yeah, the study design for 25,000. We could put that in. And then put construction separately as a later, that would go into next fiscal year.
Yep.
Yeah, he's not going to do all 6 at once. You're right, Sue. And he probably doesn't even know it's going to be 300,000 yet. There are no plans. There's nothing done yet.
Nope.
So the study would take place this coming fiscal year. He would then resubmit with designs and a real cost for each one.
there are designs. They're in the packet.
I don't have,
They're in there.
those are the designs from the other one though.
Oh, okay.
They're
the
not
other-
the new ones. They're not the new designs.
And recreation, the entrance to recreation is really different
Hmm.
from what the other ones were. So I would wager that, it's really premature to say, yeah, we'll fund that at 300,000, which I guess we're not, because I don't see it.
No,
Kind
it's
of
not.
list. But we could throw the 25,000 in and see if that changes our votes.
Sure. I think, one of the things that I was sort of conscious of is, giving a little bit to everybody too. So, you know, so DPW is sort of lost out here. I'd love to bump something up so that they can get something. Because as we think about, you know, our kind of capital program, in a lot of areas, we want to be having a more systemic approach where we spread that investment out, and we've got a kind of a life cycle approach, particularly with trucks and things like that. You know, we have benefited that in the fire department. It's a very methodical plan that we're using. The DPW not so much, but in all of these areas, I think there's definitely some thinking that needs to go into, you know, can we slide some of these things up and down to be able to spread the investment out over the various departments?
So realistically, looking at this list, I would imagine truck 42 bumps out George Hill because George Hill can't be fully funded at that level, but the truck could.
True. And I mean, we've been without anything on this road for 25 years. We haven't even, we get patches once in a while. It's terrible, but I have no problem moving George Hill somewhere else, even though I live on this rotten road.
Isn't George Hill such a big project that it should be bonded?
It is going to have to be by the time they ever get around. By the time the designs are done, it's probably going to cost
You
$20
have to
million.
bond
Yeah.
just to get the designs done. That to me, that's why I was scoring George Hill Engineering as significant, just to know where we're landing on this, to know what it's going to cost. Every year we wait, just the idea of finding out what it's going to cost gets more expensive.
Yeah.
That's why I asked the question, if you had to wait a year on a truck, would you be okay? And when he said we would figure it out, it signaled to me that maybe George Hill finally gets up on the list enough.
But they're not going to be waiting a year for a truck. They're going to be waiting 2 years for a truck.
But he knew what I meant when I asked the question. If we didn't fund it, yeah, if we
Delayed a year.
had to wait the following year to fund it, would you be okay?
All I can say is for designs that have come before, what I've observed in this town over the years is that designs have always come forward and then they sit for 5 years. And then that totally, I mean, you don't even know what the cost of the road's going to be if the designs are sitting there, but the costs go up if you can't do anything for 2 or 3 years. So the designs to me are significant. And plus the way this road and the drainage is, that road they're going to have to reconfigure a design again because of the damage that's being done. So.
So I'm
I-
wondering how
just
much,
thought-
if any of this can be funded out of road stabilization.
No, I don't think so.
You could, but you'd have to save up. So that's sort of the Carter approach of, you know, can you save up for these big things and do them all at the same time? Tim estimated that was going to be a $4 million project once you're all
Not the
all in.
construction, just the engineering.
Oh, it could be. Yep. I mean, it qualifies for that money. It's the question. Yeah. So it's sort of a philosophical question of, you know, we talked about that was to be paving roads. There's a $300,000 engineering or $400,000 engineering, you know, for a single road, taken away from so many other roads. I don't know. It could though.
Well,
It's
they have
it's a
done-
valid funding source.
And that they have done design work for other roads because they've had to tear up and go right down to the base of the thing because they couldn't just repave it. It had to be totally torn up. So they had engineering designs for that. So.
Yep. I mean, part of the, you know, the override, in my mind was to prevent these repeated, bonding, exercises, right?
Right.
So especially the capital component of it, was really designed so that we wouldn't have to go for some of these larger projects, to bonds, town meeting after town meeting, because people get, you know, they get spending fatigue as they should.
I wonder if we can just put in a recommendation that explore partial funding of George Hill Engineering out of stabilization.
And that's why I asked the question, I guess.
So
So,
the preliminary design is 220 on George Hill. You know, so they broke it out. There's final, environmental, stormwater, et cetera. So another option might be to try and find a way to get them 220 instead of 385.
Well, it's going to be interesting because George Hill Road is a scenic road. So that impacts it as well because they're not allowed to demolish those stone walls and everything else. So I don't know how they're going to handle a scenic road or if they've done scenic roads in other parts of the town. So I don't know. That we'd have to discuss with Paul, I guess.
I mean, I agree with the mindset of we need more information than we have now, and this needs to get onto a plan. But I also agree that if we spend a lot up front and then the design sits and rots, we've wasted money.
Yep.
So I'm looking for, can we start to answer the bigger questions without going all the way through this?
I would agree with that.
All right, I want to just look at this a little differently now. I want to look at projects 1 through 9. If nothing changed and we handed this in tomorrow, those would be the recommendations that we're handing forward. I want to go through 1 through 9. Does everybody feel comfortable with that as the recommendation? It does seem like every department gets a little bit, nobody gets everything. And is that where you guys kind of envisioned it being? And then I want to go through 10 through the rest and see where we were surprised. Why wasn't it higher? So when we do go score again, we're all taking that into consideration. So I think
DPW
we're
is
all
not in 1 through
universal.
9.
I'm sorry, what, Greg?
DPW is not in 1 through 9.
No.
No.
Oh, it's
Right.
10.
Yeah, it doesn't make it.
Bummer.
So
But there's still 147,000 left, right? So, and again, a million's not the number, but 147,000 on the side, so that could put truck 42 as getting funded as well as another project. It's just the way it's falling on here. So it
Right.
still could get DPW a little bit of love as well as something else. Maybe get them their lawnmower and the school a lawnmower. So 147,000 over to the side could fund a few other things, and we can include that in our recommendation. It might not rank that way, but I think that's why I want to talk about it this way, is that, you know, we were all universally in support of the handicap parking spots. Of course, we were going to do the cruisers, and that was heavily discussed before, but then as we're starting to go down, clearly Silver Lake building, that was
I have a
controversial.
problem with that. I
Yep.
didn't score it that high like that.
I would opt to rescore that and move that down a little bit.
I think it can wait another year. I don't think it's an emergency issue. The problem of her getting lifeguards and such is because it's hard to find them, and they're not getting paid. A lot of the people who want to be lifeguards they want to earn a certain amount of money, and there's not a lot of money there for them. And we've raised the salaries of them a couple of times, but I don't think it's because of the building they're not getting employees, although I'm sure the employees don't like it. But I didn't score it that high. I thought it could wait another year, not more than another year, but it could wait another year.
I wish there was a way to see that 147,000 out to the side and what other projects, like a second tier list of projects. You know what I mean? Because we could check off
Well,
like,
You get truck 42, you get tile floor, you get school district lawn tractor, and you might get all the way through 38 if I'm just looking at the.
right, and that's a lot more projects we get done if we were to take out. So George Hill is what we have to get out of this list, right?
Let's do this
No,
for a second.
no, that's taking truck 44 out. Because truck 44 is where we go negative. So we don't have enough to pay for truck 44, given the current model.
Okay.
Assuming a million, which is
Right. So the assumptions to be vetted, but the 147 number is what's left after master plan update. So it's looking at what's below that could get done. And I think you get most of 12 through 16, or nah, not quite, but you get close.
So let's
That's,
just. do
that's
this for a
150
second
something. but-
To knock out its money. If we
Yeah,
assume
there you go.
you didn't do these, you could get down,
They get 3 more in
yeah.
and awfully close.
Why
38.
can't we just recommend to Carter, these are our top 15 recommendations, and then let him decide which of those he wants?
Because we just talked about moving the Silver Lake building out.
Well, I mean, regardless of that, if it could be 12, or say, these are the 12 priorities that we think should happen for 22. And if he doesn't have the money, then he'll just eliminate some, but at least we put forward whatever we want, whether it's
Right.
12,
So
15, or 15.
if Silver Lake was pulled from this, we would get through 2 more DPW requests.
Right. So, Greg, you brought up the point that rec now has a revolving fund. How much are they gonna be getting in that? That, to me, if, you know, they can save up for a couple of years and pay for that out of the operational budget, I'd be interested in exploring that.
Or even part of it.
Yeah. It's a good point. They don't have to do it all at once.
What do we have to do? Do we have to rescore to make that go down?
I think things to think about are, as you're scoring so that what the things that you think are most important are ending up in the top ones, at least on yours. And that way, if someone else thinks there's a different set, I mean, we'll be back and have another round of scoring back on the 30th, and then we say, okay, based on the scoring, here's where it is. Do we want to make any small tweaks?
I'd agree with that. And then we just agree on what,
10 now.
then we just agree on what our commentary is and we pass it along.
I fixed mine.
And I will
It's-
fix the notes and comments. I'll make that so that we don't have to keep moving them around as they update, so.
So I think in terms of our value to Carter for this budget process, all of that commentary around the alternate funding sources and ways to split up the requests to be able to fund some of them and those sorts of things, that's probably gonna be the stuff that's most valuable to him.
I agree with that. Is that something that, Greg, are you capturing that, or Colleen, are you capturing?
I'm capturing parts of it. I will probably go back and capture more later.
Okay.
Do we have a set of questions that we want to ask departments before, or are we okay with working with what we have?
So the questions I've been hearing are, if we restore loader 38, does that get it an inspection sticker? Because I think that changes people's vote if it does. It was my understanding it would not. It would just extend the life of the machine to be used in the yard. But I want further clarification on that. As far as the school tiles, how much of a health and safety factor, but I believe that was answered. If it's not, I can ask. I want to know about the cost of the fire truck a little bit more in depth. I know there is the equipment replacement program, but is 740 the number? Is it possible to be lower? What equipment are we putting on there to justify that? Contact Berger about his service counters. Is it for the design and the installation, or what would just the design be? And asking rec about their revolving fund and possibly funding it through that over the few years. Does everybody agree with that or have any additional questions?
My notes in my minutes that I hadn't completed yet for the loaders was the rebuild of one of the roadworthy machines is expected to get another 10 years out of it. It would not pass state inspection next time. If it is not rebuilt at this time, it would likely not be able to be rebuilt in the future. So that's
I
what I
think that-
captured from that discussion.
I think the problem for me is I had a separate discussion with him at the DPW facility. So I think
Okay.
further clarification would be a good idea.
And on the service counters, 25,000.
We're losing you.
is the actual work. I mean, you might want to get more clarification from Bob, but that's what he put on the form, so.
So
What did
should
it
we,
say? What did Amy say? You weren't, I couldn't hear all of it because you
Oh.
kind of faded
Yeah,
out.
you cut out.
So on the form,
Yeah,
it says 25,000 for study
Right.
and design, and then 300,000 for construction.
right.
If we need something more granular than that, then that's fine, but the question that she just asked seemed to be answered by this, unless I'm misunderstanding.
nope,
But
you're
yeah.
good. So
But
should
that's
we
what I'm
have
saying.
that number in there because we would just be funding the design and then writing a note as to why the number is what it is?
That's what we were talking about that earlier and we got off on a different track, but I would like to see that number change. I mean, at this point, it wouldn't matter because it's still very low on the list.
Right.
But for this fiscal year, a $25,000 study and design process, in theory, he could decide to go ahead and do that.
Right.
But if he sees that it's 325,000 and he doesn't look at these forms, then he won't do anything with it.
Yeah, I would like to see that listed as 25,000 and then a note to the side of just for the design or whatever it's called, plans.
And then we'll put the 300,000 in the next phase after Christmas.
So do we want to contact him and ask, since he didn't estimate by fiscal year, which fiscal year he would like each of the pieces of that to be in?
I'd just like to ask the question, what is he planning on doing this year and how much is that gonna cost?
All right.
For the purposes of this budget, putting this budget in these, prioritizing what we can fund and all, I think that's the relevant question.
Okay, so Carter did say something to me today. That is, our deliverable date is December 1st. But if we
Yep.
wanted a little more wiggle room to bring in department heads, December 15th would be okay too. So that gives us time to invite everybody in, rather than just do it through emails and forwarding emails, just inviting people in and having the conversation. So I can shoot off emails tomorrow trying to find out people's availabilities. I still told him, I think I want to get you a preliminary recommendation for December 1st, but then that gives us 2 more weeks to polish it up any further that we may want to do that. So
I don't think we have, who are you going to shoot letters off to ask them to come in? Not everybody.
no, like Burger, I
Yeah.
think it would be nice to have Rec in. And I can do with
Fire.
the loader, that can be done through an email. So who else did you say, Greg?
Fire. We
Fire.
didn't have fire come in at all, and Amy noticed that there's no actual justification in the package for this engine. So that would be good to have.
Yep.
So
So
if we
I'll,
could tell them, we'd like them to come in, these are the things we'd like to talk to them about so they can have a little bit of time to prepare.
yep.
That would be good.
I also like the idea of giving Carter something on December 1st so that he can give us feedback.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I think that would be great.
Yeah, I was almost gonna suggest that we bring Carter in for that, to just talk, basically have a discussion with him about how we, what we learned during this process and some of the intricacies of it. It might be better to just give it to him and let him react to it.
Well, according to the bylaws we just passed, the superintendent and the TA are non-voting members of this committee or their designated representatives.
Mhm.
So it's not be unreasonable for us to invite them to come and provide some feedback.
Absolutely.
I don't know, in my personal opinion, I don't think we need Jay. Because he's pretty much discussed everything already. Well, I shouldn't say that because I attend the school committee meeting, so I know what's being said, but
I mean,
No, we've met with them a lot, though.
yeah.
I think
Met
we
with
need
Linda.
Jay in here.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
So
Right, does
just
everybody
let them know
feel-
when the meetings are because they are non-voting members, but don't say that we're going to have any questions for the school department at this point.
Okay. All right, is there anything, so did we make a final determination? Are we scoring on 1 through 5 still, or 1 through 4?
I want 1 through 5.
5.
5, 5, 5, okay, there it is, that's done. And then, we'll meet again on whenever that is, the 30th. And we'll discuss, just basically have this discussion again, round 2. I'll have a little more information from the emails that I send off and then dates on when people said that they would be able to come in. Does that work for everybody?
Love it.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to discuss tonight?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Friday. One weekend at a time.
Yeah, Jeremy's going day by day.
That's right.
Sorry,
Can't
man.
look that far ahead.
My kids are home from school until after Thanksgiving, so Thanksgiving starts now.
Right on.
Yeah,
That's right.
I know.
All right, well, I'll take a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Greg,
Aye.
Sue,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Colleen, I. Okay, you guys have a great weekend. This was
Who
fun.
made the
Sue.
motion?
Me.
Okay, and who seconded?
I did.
Thank you.